Welcome back, boxing fans. Oh, people are funny. So I was just listening to Beeb telling people about if you are so against Saudi Arabia, I hope you don't buy any products from China. Yet, it's ironic being an American who drives a car and literally fuels their cars up with gasoline that comes from Saudi Arabia, right? Because we know America's connection to Saudi Arabia and the whole oil field. So it's funny, right? Just listen to people preach to other people, yet they don't really know fucking what they're talking about. He's talking about all the injustices in China, comparing it to Saudi Arabia, but he's never been to Saudi Arabia and he's never been to China. So what the fuck does he know? I don't preach about Saudi Arabia because I've never been to Saudi Arabia. I have no idea what goes on. I have no need to be critical against them or be pro them. If they put on boxing, then I'm positive towards them because I'm a boxing fan and I have no reason to feel negatively about them because I have no reason to feel negative about them. I'm not going to just buy whatever media is pushing because who gives a fuck what they have to say. And as far as China, I live next to China. And I'm not a big proponent of China, but just listen to that American fucking blah, blah, blah. Right? I'm American, so let me tell you the way it's supposed to be. Talking about, China and all this, the terrible things they do. You come from America. China hasn't come close to doing all the terrible things fucking your country has done. So let's just keep that fucking real. And obviously, I live in Taiwan, so we live in fear of being invaded by China every day. Mind you, living in Taiwan, you don't even fucking pay attention to any of it. But obviously, this is a boxing video, but it's a similar type of situation. Shakur Stevenson just talked about retiring, right? And we know it's much ado about nothing. It's very similar to what Teofimo Lopez had to say, after his Josh Taylor fight, where he was just bitter because he feels he deserves more money, he deserves more recognition, he deserves more praise for the things he's done. So he's just, throwing his toys out of the pram, right? That's what he was doing. So we didn't pay much attention to it because we know he's talking out of his ass. And it's no different than Shakur. Shakur is coming off of really one of the worst performances of his career. Sure, he had injuries, whatever the case was be. I didn't criticize Shakur because I understand that boxers don't always perform at their best. I saw Lomachenko against Teo Lopez, where he didn't fucking fight for the first 6 to 7 rounds of the fight. So, I understand that this is something that happens in sports. I've played sports, right? Sometimes you play and you're not at your best. It just is the way it is. So, I'm not hating or shitting on Shakur Stevenson. I've been very fair to Shakur from day one. When he first came out of the amateurs, I wasn't a big fan of his style. I felt initially when he came into the pros, he fought way too amateur style, which was just never going to make him really appealing to the American audience. He's adjusted, become a lot more flat-footed, stationary. I hear some people talk about how Devin Haney has better footwork and can box and move better than Shakur. No, he chooses to box and move more than Shakur. Shakur was a much higher level amateur fighter, boxing and moving, right? So yes, he can do that. But he's trying to become more of a pro style fighter. So you get away from doing that. You get away from extraneous movement, which doesn't do anything for you, which basically tires you out, but doesn't win you rounds and doesn't win you points. And that's how he's adjusted. So he's in front of you, using small angles, making you miss, making you pay, right? Yet, even in doing that, he's still not the most exciting fighter out there. He doesn't necessarily throw combination punches. He's not a big knockout puncher. So, what this video talks about is just the point that some of these boxers need to get off their prima donna status and understand that it's nice that you're confident and you feel you're the best, but that shit is irrelevant. Really, it's irrelevant. You feeling you're the best doesn't mean fuck all to boxing fans. boxing fans have a whole different criteria of what they want out of fighters. They want the best fighters fighting the best fighters. They want entertainment. They want fights to be competitive, so it's back and forth, not dominant performances where the competition is so one-sided that it's not entertaining, that a guy is never tested, that a guy never has to come through adversity, right? People want to see people tested so they know truly how great they are, right? That's why guys like Duran, Leonard, Hearns, and Hagler get so much praise, because these fighters were great, and they could have chose to fight lower level competition and been far more dominant and never been tested and not take any losses, but they didn't do that. Leonard fought Hearns in a unification fight when they were both, I think, 26 and 24 years old. 26 and 24 years old. That's like, Shakur fighting Devin Haney right now. That's basically what they did. Unfortunately, we didn't get that with Shakur and Haney, but we did get it with Leonard and Hearns. And then, of course, we got Duran and Leonard. Duran had already proven himself. He was already considered a pound-for-pound fighter and one of the best lightweights in history before he moved up to the welterweight division and took on the best welterweight fighter in Leonard, beating him. Yes, he lost in the rematch, but we know a lot of that had to do with him not being at his best, because having a short turnaround, obviously enjoying the celebrity status of beating Leonard in his home country, being a superstar and a hero to the nation, doing a lot of things that he probably shouldn't have done if you knew you were going to have a rematch so quickly. But nonetheless, then they both went up. They fought Hagler, the best middleweight at that time, right? This is what these guys were doing. Not fighting top competition, fighting the best, right? Fighting the best. And even when Duran got knocked out by Hearns, that didn't take away his status as one of the best fighters in boxing history. No. Styles make fights. Hearns beats him, and then Duran fights Hagler, who fucking knocked out Hearns, and gives Hagler a way better fight. And he's a far smaller fighter. He's a lightweight, whereas Hearns was a welterweight when he began, and obviously a guy who was far taller and longer than Hagler and able to put on weight, right? And then you had Leonard, who out of 3 years of inactivity ended up facing Hagler, beat him, and then obviously faced the old man tour with Duran and Hearns later on. But obviously they were all around the same point of their career, so it didn't matter that it was a little too late. They were all a little past their best. So, it was what it was. That's what boxing fans want. They want to see the people they like and support challenged. That's why when Pacquiao gets knocked out by Marquez, I don't throw him away and discard him and criticize and hate on him because, now he makes me look bad because he got beat. No. I want to see him in challenging fights, which show what kind of real superstar he is, to then come back at 40 years old and beat a prime Keith Thurman to become a world champion. Right? That's what I want to see. I want to see Lomachenko tested by Haney, by Teofimo Lopez. Right? I want to see him tested against the best fighters of his era. So the point of this video is obviously when we look at certain style of fighters, and this isn't criticizing certain style of fighters, but you have to understand, if you have a certain style, you can't be shocked or surprised when casual and a certain group of boxing fans just don't find you appealing. Rigo, we know, was a great fighter. He was a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, just like Lomachenko. But unlike Lomachenko, he did not put on entertaining performances. Lomachenko, not the hardest puncher, but regardless of who he fought, his fights were entertaining for the most part. I can't really think of a fight off the top of my head that was an uninteresting fight that Lomachenko was involved in. Whereas Rigo has countless fights that were boring, snooze fests, some of the worst fights that I've ever seen. Even though this was a guy who had sublime boxing skills and great one-punch power. So In truth, he should have been far more entertaining because he always had the answer, right, to making fights exciting. But yet, he still was in fights that were brutal, terrible to watch, and fights that boxing fans will never, ever watch again after the first initial time of seeing them. Shakur is obviously in that Rigo group of fighters. He may adjust, become a little more professional, sit down on his punches, put himself in position to be in more entertaining fights, or he may go the opposite direction and just fight safe, defensive, do what he has to do to win, knowing that it doesn't matter. As long as I don't lose and I continue to win, I'm going to be recognized as pound for pound the best and recognized as one of the best fighters of my era. That's true. You very well may be. You may be the next Floyd Mayweather. Go unbeaten for 50-0. Win 4, maybe 5 weight classes. Beat all the other best opponents out there in front of you. But if you do it in such a way that doesn't grab people's attention, doesn't make you an entertaining fighter to watch, doesn't put you in fights that consistently or can be considered fights of the year type of caliber of fights, the reality of the situation is you're never going to be loved. You're never going to be revered. You're always going to have a certain level of criticism towards you. A guy like Gatti, who people know is not as good as a Floyd Mayweather, but was a far more popular fighter. A fighter who networks liked far more as well, because his fights were entertaining. Right? We just had Jaime Munguia, who nobody is considering a pound-for-pound fighter. Nobody talks about how they think Jaime Munguia is going to be a pound-for-pound number one fighter for the next 10 years like they do Shakur Stevenson. Right? But what we do know about Jaime Munguia is that he entertains. He's always in entertaining fights. He's in fights of the year. He's in fights that boxing fans want to watch again and again and again. Prior to him beating John Ryder, people were saying, fuck man, Canelo Alvarez better not fight that fucking guy because that's bullshit. That's bullshit if he fights him. Now, after the John Ryder fight, opinions have changed. People are like, damn, I'd love to see Jaime Munguia and Canelo Alvarez fight. That would be an entertaining fight. Jaime Munguia is an entertaining fighter. Whether he wins, loses, or draws, it's irrelevant. No one expects Jaime Munguia to retire an undefeated fighter. What people expect from him is to be in entertaining fights. Fights that people are going to enjoy watching. And because of that, they're going to have a huge amount of respect for him as a fighter. You know, popularity-wise, Jaime Munguia may be a guy who makes huge money in the game and is hugely popular, whereas a guy who with far more skill and an Olympian and a guy who everyone knows is a better technical fighter like a Shakur Stevenson, he'll make good money, but he may not become the star a Jaime Munguia becomes. He may not be as revered. He may not be a guy who's putting on big pay-per-view fights like Jaime Munguia, right? The possibility is very easily seen that because of a boring style that Shakur Stevenson falls back into consistently, because that's his comfort zone, compared to a Jaime Munguia whose comfort zone is fucking going tooth and nail with you. There's an obvious difference between the two of them and their mental makeup. And I'm not criticizing one or the other. One guy's probably going to have a longer career because of the way he fights compared to the other guy who may not have as long a career unless, like Gatti, Barrera, Morales, he eventually changes his style and becomes much more refined and not so rudimentary in the way he goes about fighting guys. But at the same time, you know, I can't see the criticism towards a Jaime Munguia. I can tell you right now that I would much rather look forward to Jaime Munguia's next fight than I look forward to Shakur Stevenson's next fight. And it's irrelevant of who they fight, because literally they both could fight low-level opposition, I'm still going to enjoy a Jaime Munguia fight far more. They could fight similar level competition to what they've been fighting, good, solid opponents. I'm going to enjoy a Jaime Munguia fight more. Or you could put them in with elite level opponents. And once again, guaranteed I'm going to enjoy Jaime Munguia's fight more, even if in the process he was to get knocked out. Him fighting Canelo Alvarez, even defeat, is going to be far more entertaining than watching Shakur Stevenson win in victory. And unfortunately, some people are going to make this into a race thing, but it's not a race thing. You could change the color of both of these fighters, change their names, but keep the style, and things would be exactly the same. I say the same thing about Tyson Fury. He's a boring fighter that I don't look forward to watching fight. You can see people generally feel that way because he's fighting Usyk for undisputed. Yet, as big as that fight is, Anthony Joshua fighting Ngannou is a bigger fight that's getting more attention. Why is that? Why is that? It proves my point. And so does this background. Woo, pretty. But Usyk and Fury are more boring defense-first fighters. Whereas AJ and his vulnerability, and Ngannou, his perceived aggressiveness and power, are just more entertaining. You expect to be more entertained from AJ fighting an MMA fighter than watching these two fighters fight for undisputed. Because styles do make fights. And I know some people always want to say black fighters are criticized, blah, 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 blah. But no. Because not all black fighters fight defense first boring. Just like not all Mexicans fight come forward, face first, aggressive, take one to land one. Right? Like, it's a stupid analogy to just generalize everybody into one group. Because we know there's subtleties and differences in the Black American boxing group, in the Mexican boxing group, and in every other one. I heard somebody, Angelo Leo, talking about how he's sparred Japanese fighters, so he knows how they fight. So because of that, he feels confident that he can beat Inoue. Oh my fucking God. When I heard that, I was like, dude, man, please, just shut up. Shut up. You're a guy who got fucking schooled by Stephen Fulton, a dude with no power at all. No power at all. You won your title against a guy who is a good fighter, also with no power. You're a guy who's aggressive, come forward fighter. You won't last 6 rounds with Inoue. Inoue will fucking kill you because the way you fight makes you so susceptible to fucking counter shots. And you also have no power. But it's okay you feel because you've sparred Japanese fighters, now you're prepared for Inoue. I mean, that's almost as ridiculous and stupid as people who criticize Inoue because he never fought or sparred black fighters. It's like, fuck, man. Why are you dudes so fucking obsessed with these kind of generalizations? Right? When I'm talking about Shakur, I'm using a specific fighter and a style we've seen a lot. Obviously, there's differences and subtleties the way he does it and other people do it. Jaime Munguia the same. He's a Mexican fighter, but he's not exactly the same as every other Mexican fighter, right? But what he is entertaining, like many other Mexican fighters. Shakur was very exciting in his fight against the Japanese fighter because styles make fights. But he's been very boring and not fun to watch in several fights against longer, awkward fighters. Nakatila, a guy that somebody else destroyed easily, but Shakur struggled with him. And I think he would beat the guy who beat him easy, but styles make fights. Once again, Shakur, his mental makeup is to go defense first when he feels threatened. Munguia's is to throw, and throw, right? And because of that, one fighter is always going to be more entertaining than the other. And that's why you can almost guarantee that Jaime Munguia is going to be a more popular boxer for general boxing fans. They may appreciate Shakur and understand that he's a pound for pound fighter, but he's not going to be a guy that people are super excited to watch. That's why right now, when there's a conversation about Navarrete moving to 135, people would be more prone to watch Navarrete fight fucking Lomachenko. Right? Because you would be guaranteed that that fight would be more entertaining than Shakur versus Navarrete. Just true. We know Navarrete, his power, his awkwardness. Shakur is prone to do the exact same thing he did with De Los Santos and Nakatila. Win a boring defense-first fight where he feels threatened because the guy's power and awkwardness, his elbows and heads flying everywhere, that he's going to take a more defensive stance against a guy like him, making it a very boring fight where he beats a fighter, but at the end of the day, nobody really cares, right? It's not going to turn him into a superstar. It's not going to build his brand to be the next Floyd Mayweather. Just to give you a perspective, and this is only one channel, but I just saw that IBFP today came out and said, no one cares if Shakur Stevenson retires. And the truth is, there's been plenty of people who said that. In my comment section, people have said that. I would care if Shakur retired, because it would be a shame for a guy with so much talent to stop at 26 years of age when he has another 10 years of potentially dominant boxing in him. Right? So I'm not a guy who's pushing this kind of stupidity, unlike some channels who have for years talked about how they pray that Golovkin retires. They can't wait. They pray when Roman Gonzalez and Lomachenko retires. Like, I mean, those are three of the most exciting fighters over the last fucking 15 years, but you'd be happy when they retire. See, I don't understand that mentality. That's just a hater's mentality. All three of those fighters, far more entertaining than Shakur Stevenson. But you'd be more excited to see them retire than to see them continue to fight. But, you'll be all over the internet talking about the hate towards black American fighters because people don't give a fuck that Shakur Stevenson retires. Yet, people said the same thing about Teofimo Lopez. And you didn't get upset then. You weren't in your feelings when he said that, right? Because people know these dudes are capping. We've had years and years of guys like Adrian Broner threaten to retire fucking every 2 days. And at a certain point, you just don't give a fuck. Because you know these guys are not going to walk away from the money that's on the table. They would be stupid to do that. These dudes don't have the integrity of a Barry Sanders to walk away from the game because at this point they just had enough. They don't have the integrity of a Klopp who's right now back at the pinnacle of, doing what he does as a coach or manager in football, soccer. But will walk away right now just as his team is coming into a new renaissance, right? Yet he'll still walk away from it. And people understand that, certain people have that sort of mentality. They understand when enough's enough and they walk away from it because now is the time. Unfortunately for boxers, generally they're completely the opposite. I mean, the only fighter we've really seen walk away probably premature is probably Andre Ward. And I'm sure a lot of that had to do with physical breakdown and, just physical. The years and years of training and working out and just the physicality and how physically it was taking his body and putting a toll on him, which is probably the main reason he did retire. Because at that point, he was at the top of his game. Bigger and better money fights were inevitably ahead of him. So it wasn't the right time to walk away, but, he chose to do what he chose to do. Whether I agree with it or not, it's not my choice to make. I know that Shakur is not going to retire, and I know Lopez is not going to retire. So when all is said and done, I know that this doesn't really mean anything. It's just a lot of social media noise to get some attention, and that's what it is. It's a kid throwing his toys out of the pram, crying and complaining. Yet I just listened to Bob Arum on Steve Kim's YouTube channel, and it was a good interview with Bob Arum. And Bob Arum, all the criticism he does get, but he talked about how he's got a good relationship with Lopez and Shakur. He supports Shakur moving forward. Everybody has bad fights, so they're not like thinking too much about it. Obviously with Lopez, he says they talk all the time because they both basically are in Vegas constantly, and he says he's a good kid. He enjoys hanging out with him and shooting the shit because he's entertaining. And he described him as mercurial, meaning these dudes are up and down personality wise. One day they wake up and they're like fucking super excited, they're ready to take on the world. The next day they have a real negativity towards everything in their life. And we see a lot more of that in sports now. Ryan Garcia and Charlo and other people going through mental meltdowns. It is what it is. As a fan of the sport, I don't worry about all of this kind of stuff, the minutia of the sport, because it's irrelevant to what I, as a boxing fan, enjoy about boxing, which is the matchups. I want to see the best matchups in the sport. That's all. The rest is relevant. I don't care who's promoting it. I don't care if there's crossover fights. I don't care who's paying for it, as long as shit's getting done. I'm not going to fucking argue and complain about contracts that I have no idea about. I saw people on social media that I've been going back and forth with, and not being against what they say, but just people continuously still talking out their ass. People are saying that, I don't understand why people are criticizing Al Haymon in the PBC because Canelo Alvarez is not going to fight David Benavidez. We don't know what Canelo Alvarez is going to do in his next two fights. So as far as the speculation, I'm sitting back waiting to see what happens. I'm not going to speculate about something until actually we have confirmation how it's going to really pan out one way or the other. But what I do know is that PBC and Al Haymon signed Canelo Alvarez to a 3-fight deal. And I do know that the way these promoters do things is they give you a list of potential opponents and you can pick and choose the one you want, right? So when people act like David Benavidez is a sure thing, we don't know what he is. We don't know what Al Haymon is doing. We don't know if Al Haymon's even including David Benavidez in this 3-fight contract. Because in truth, he doesn't need to. He could sign an extension with Canelo Alvarez afterwards, allowing the fight to become even bigger. How long did they work fucking the whole fight between Floyd Mayweather and Pacquiao? 8 fucking years. 8 years. How long did they have Spence Crawford go on? 5 years. 5. How long has Canelo Benavidez been going on? A year? 18 months? Not that long. Canelo hasn't been at 168 pounds that long. So it's a far more in its infancy, right? And these people acting like, well, Canelo's the boss. He fights who he wants to fight. Come on. Yeah, he has the final say on who he fights, but he's just signed a $100 million contract to fight PBC fighters. It's no surprise the two Charlo boys are there, because what else are those two guys going to do moving forward in their career? Probably fucking nothing. So Al Haymon is cashing out on them, using them to do big pay-per-views with Canelo Alvarez. Right? And if you can't do a Spence Crawford fight because Spence is done, his eyes, whatever, and you can't do that pay-per-view, would it be a shock to see fucking Canelo versus Crawford? A fight that is guaranteed to do big pay-per-view numbers. Because believe it or not, casual fans will be far more intrigued to watch that fight than David Benavidez. That's fucking true. You know it, and I know it. So the reality is, you don't need to put David Benavidez in one of those first 3-fight contract deals. He can fight Jesse Hart in his next fight, a good opponent. but not a fight anyone gives a fuck about. They can put that on pay-per-view and it can do another shit pay-per-view. But they're gradually building him and building the fight between him and Canelo. And eventually it's going to get to a point where the fight happens. And it's probably going to disappoint because it's taken too long. Canelo has gotten too old. David Benavidez can't make weight. Who knows what the scenario is? People are speculating on stuff that they don't know anything about. And that's all I said. Because the reality is, I don't know who offered who a contract. I haven't seen a contract. I haven't had confirmation that anybody's been given any fucking contracts here, there, or wherever. We've heard speculation he's going to fight this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, that guy. So how do you know who he's going to fight? I hear it's going to be Charlo and then Crawford. But if Crawford fights Spence, then the chances of that Crawford-Canelo fight happening is not going to happen in 2024. Because the Spence fight's not going to happen fucking in probably the next 4 months at least. February, March, April, May. I'd be surprised if Spence Crawford 2 happens fucking before June, which means you think then Crawford is going to have a turnaround for July, August, September to fight Canelo Alvarez in that quick turnaround. I'm not to say it potentially can't happen, but I don't see it happening. Not unless Spence retires and then Crawford is sitting there fucking twiddling his thumbs with no option, except potentially maybe a Tim Tszyu fight, which is not that big of a fight, to be honest. And I'm not saying I think Crawford should take the fight, but it's not my choice to make. It's Crawford's choice to make. And if he makes it, I guarantee you it's going to do far bigger numbers than fucking a David Benavidez fight. Why? Because casual sports fans are going to be far more interested in Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford. That's true. You know, you may not like it, but that doesn't change reality. And don't hold me accountable because I'm not the one that's dictating this. I'm just giving you an honest fucking breakdown. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. But you know it's true. And that's really what's making you angry. But leave your comments below. I know people are going to say I'm hating on Shakur, but I'm not hating on Shakur. And I'm not hating on black Americans because we know Shakur is Puerto Rican, right? So, you know, it has nothing to do with any of that. It has to do with reality. Certain fighters have a style that's far more marketable, far more entertaining. Sometimes your flaw makes you a bigger star. Gaddy is an example, right? AJ, an example. He was obviously big when he was a dominant heavyweight that people thought was going to take over boxing. But he's also just been as popular even when he seemed like he was the heavyweight version of Amir Khan. Right? Because literally anything can happen at any moment. And that's entertaining. With Jaime Munguia, his fight with Derevchenko was fucking fight of the year. Fight of the year. And now he just fought John Ryder in a great fight. And a fight where he showed far more skill, patience, and obviously working with Freddie Roach seems to really have a positive impact on him as a fighter. But it's one fight, so you can't overreact to it because we don't know what he's going to do against his next opponent, who I hope is Berlanga, because that would be a fucking great fight. But leave your comments below. I know some people obviously can't talk boxing without pushing narratives, so everything they hear is all fucking negative, negative, negative. But literally there's nothing in this video that's negative. It's just honest. You know it's honest and I know it's honest. People talked about how Rigo was mistreated, but it's not that Rigo was mistreated. Rigo just refused to fight in a style that would make him more entertaining. And because of that, people fucking didn't want to watch him fight. So then even promoters like Al Heyman wouldn't even put their fighters in with him. They literally told fucking Leo Santa Cruz not to fight him. Move up, fight Frampton, fight Abner Mares. Those fights will be very successful. And you don't need to waste your time fighting this style of fighter, which is not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for us. So fuck that guy. That's what Al Heyman did. Yet, once again, Al Heyman didn't have any criticism. Leo Santa Cruz got criticized like crazy for ducking Rigo. But the reason he ducked Rigo is because his promoter literally fucking told him to do that. And then told him to duck fucking Gary Russell as well. Right? But then again, people ignore that and don't hold Al Heyman accountable. And now, of course, it's Canelo Alvarez. But once again, you're not fucking even considering Al Heyman's part in it. Right? You're ignoring that completely. Yet we've seen time and time again how the PBC does their fucking work. Crawford and Spence, Pacquiao and Floyd, Canelo and Benavidez. Would you be surprised if this fight didn't happen until 2025? I wouldn't be. I wouldn't be surprised fucking in the least. So the question is, why are you? But leave your comments below. Thanks for watching. Peace out. And I'll see you next time. Enjoy your weekend.